do you have a sense for what the current state is of the security practices of these organizations? Are there security certifications being done? How would you characterize the current state of security with these social media platforms?
Do you know, it's hard to say with any great authority because I haven't worked for one. But what I'm seeing on the outside is a regular series of breaches. It seems to be in the news all the time. And that isn't good news because most companies aren't in the news all the time for being breached. It does happen to most companies at some stage to some extent. But these guys, they're a big target. In fact, they're probably the biggest targets going for bad actors. So they're being attacked all the time, and there are breaches happening. We've seen that that's happened with their own people internally, and it's happened externally as well. And this can happen to anyone. But the problem is that I struggle to be able to assess it because there's no clear guidance from them as to what they're truly doing behind the scenes with security. If I went to any other person, I could go and look at the SOC 2 report. I can't get that for, say, Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That's interesting. And you mentioned that there are a number of like high profile, probably people who've had their accounts hacked. I think what's most concerning, well, all of it is concerning, but one of the key concerns I have is that oftentimes as auditors and risk professionals, we're looking at the outside threat. But it sounds to me like you're saying that some of this has really happened from internal players or employees in these organizations, no?
Oh, definitely. And it's because of the way they're set up that makes them even more vulnerable to internal people. So I first came across this quite a few years ago in the early days of social media. A company I was working for then, they were going to go and get rid of effectively a guy in marketing. And he took umbrage at this. So what he did was he realized he had the password to the, it was the Facebook account at the time. And what he did was he changed it. And then he realized they couldn't get in. And he thought, oh, that's highly amusing. They can't get into their own Facebook account. And then he realized he could post anything he liked. So what he started doing was starting to post things about his own situation. And then he realized he could actually post things about anything to do with the company, including things that weren't even true. And it took us weeks to get that out of his hands, because then you're into the whole process, the black hole of trying to recover an account from somebody who looks like the authorized owner of it. He had the account. We even had multi-factor authentication, but of course it was to his phone. So that looked even more like it was his account. It took us ages to get that out of his hands. And it was simply because they didn't really have strong controls over this. If you're going to let someone go, make sure they don't have the password to your social media site. Would be a pretty good starting point as a process. But it didn't work that way. That was something they were going to take off him after they decided to announce it, they were going to sack him. So that happened then. I've seen that at multiple companies probably every year since I've been looking at social media. It is so easy for an internal person to do. And because the systems are set up almost to have one owner and one password. So what companies do is they tend to have that password and they never change it. And because they never change it, that means also quite often people who have left the company still know the password to your social media account and could take it over as well. So it's a slight extra dimension. Whereas if you were an internal company, say I was working on Oracle or SAP, even if I still had my access, I can only do what my access permits me to do. I don't have total ownership of the system. Social media, I have total ownership of the system. And when I've left, I probably can't get into the internal network to access it. But because this is web-based, I can still access it. So most companies probably haven't changed the password after every time a marketing person leaves or a comms person leaves. So that person can probably leave and still sign on into their social media account. So it's opened up an area of risk that just doesn't exist for other systems.
Absolutely. And I would think that if the password is never changed, it's very highly likely that it's being shared as well, which is something that's just fundamental to, good practices. And we're, it really boils down to a lot of the same things, foundational tenets of risk and security, good practices. But I would think that shared passwords would then be a problem as well. So
it is, Lisa, and it's exactly that, exactly as you said. Yeah. It's the foundations here of you don't want to share passwords, but you know what? They've almost got no choice. Now, there are some tools out there for helping publish on social media sites, but I still think there are flaws with them that you can get around. They have to share the passwords ultimately. Once you start sharing them, you don't want to change them all the time, which means they're now weak. because they get known. And once you've started sharing, you actually might as well admit you don't know who's got them. And I've seen that in all kinds of systems, not just social media systems. Once you start sharing a password, you might as well assume everyone in the group knows it.
Would you say that that's a very common attack vector is, that password? Or in terms of some of the breaches that you were identifying earlier, would you say that one of the commonalities between these is perhaps poor password or access controls?
It has been in the cases I've seen, especially as a consultant, I'd see it quite a bit. So when it was an internal breach, it was almost always the password. To be honest, though, quite often when it was an external breach as well, so just somebody trying to hack in, they'd done their phishing correctly and they'd find the password. And another feature of this is quite often they have multiple social media accounts, so they keep them in an Excel file. And the amount of times I've been able to find that Excel file and so I've got all the passwords to all the accounts now. So in one bad day, I could actually go and take over the whole social media of a very large company, if that was the way they were set up.
Absolutely.
And so if a hacker got hold of that, they're away in a hack. They're going to enjoy themselves that day.